All right. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our third edition of Engage and Adapt. Please feel free to welcome yourself, introduce yourself in the chat, let us know your name, where you're joining from. And then throughout the webinar, please feel free to take care of your needs, whatever you need to do in order to feel comfortable, whatever you need to do in order to feel uh, good in the space. Please feel free to do so. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. We have a special guest. And we'll jump right into it here in a moment. We'll just wait for a few more folks to trickle in as we prepare to start. We have Courtney as our chat monitor. So if there's any questions, they'll make sure to send them my way. But we also want to make sure that folks are comfortable participating. So please introduce yourself. Let us know where you're coming from. Courtney coming in from Montana. Thank you. I myself I'm currently coming in from Washington, D.C.
And I'm Charlyn, and I'm coming in from Capitol Heights, Maryland.
Yes, thank you, Charlyn. We're going to be Anne Marie Snow from Connecticut. Thank you for joining us. All right, so we're at time, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Please feel free to continue to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to see your names and know where everyone's coming in from. So as I said, this is our Engage and Adapt webinar series. It's a space where we practice lifting our voice and advocacy while we're also lifting our hands in help. We're living in some pretty unique times, and so we want to make sure we are approaching each of these challenges as best as we can. I am your moderator. This is my first time writing solo. Typically, Reverend Moira Harris will be with me, but she's currently not here with me. So you're stuck with me, but we do have a special guest. So I'm sorry. So today's webinar is Moving Community Amid Chaos, Responding to Community Needs and Hunger with Faith, Care, and Collective Action. So that is our theme for this week. And our special guest is Charlyn Anderson of Capitol Heights, Maryland, as she just mentioned. And Charlyn is the founder and CEO of Starting With Today. It's a Starting With Today is a 501c3 nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. that promotes Black well-being and liberation. In May 2018, Starting With Today launched the Shape Up, the Barbershop Talk series, which provides free group therapy and wellness sessions led and designed by Black men in Washington, D.C. Since the launching, the Shape Up was partnered with the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, the Funk Parade, and has been featured on WUSA 9. As a response to its success in June 2020, Starting With Today launched My Hair Appointment, a space for Black women to define, explore, and cultivate their own well-being. Charlyn uses her expertise in employee development and engagement program management and community development in the nonprofit, local government, and corporate sectors to create lasting impacts within our community. She's also an active member of DataKind Global Advisory Group, the Black Female Executive Directors, and has been a mentor to youth for over 15 years. So please want to welcome Charlyn Anderson. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Chad. I'm very excited to be here for sure. Thank you.
No, of course. And if there's anything I left out of that impressive bio, please make sure to let me know.
Nothing. Except that I still like being outside, having fun with my friends. The last outdoor activity, and I've been, doing some hiking and walking, but also picked some apples, went apple picking recently. And
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, also making sure to keep the human dimension in mind.
Absolutely, absolutely, 1000%.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So again, I just spoke shortly about Starting With Today, cultivating Black liberation and well-being through consistent community engagement. And you all recently had an anniversary. Do you want to talk a little bit about the organization and some of the work that you all are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Starting With Today was founded in 2012 from an idea, but launched in January of 2014. And we just started really small, working around um, what access and information was getting. Um, shared and to who and why it wasn't being shared to communities that look like mine, and communities that I grew up in, and then communities I found myself in DC area. So how can we transfer information was just the ethos of starting with today, and just really having a strength positive approach to our work. A lot of times when you think about Black communities, especially when we're talking about in the DC area, Ward 7, Ward 8, as we call it, east of the Anacostia River, a lot of times people see us from a deficit mindset, but as you know, some of the most brilliant minds, creative minds, generous souls are in our community. So, how do we move from that space to really just affirm people and affirm our community as a whole to move towards more well and liberated spaces?
No, I really appreciate you talking about the impact of giving people information in order to move them into action, right? Oftentimes we're inundated with a lot of information around what's going wrong in the world. But I think having that focus on moving people from, not really knowing what's going on, not really understanding into how can I, not only understand what's happening, but move in order to act and affect it is really important. And that's one of the aspects that I really appreciate about the work that you all are doing at Starting With Today.
Thank you.
No, of course, of course. So we all know community center work has its own unique challenges. How do you approach the communities that you're working in to build trust and collaboration?
Well, for one, we're a part of the community, right? So we are serving with typically within a 5 mile radius of where our leadership lives, where I live. So that means that we are seeing each other at the grocery store. We're seeing each other at the parks. We are in actual community with each other. So I think one that helps us build trust. And I think the other piece is really just over time, consistency over time, right? And knowing people can find you, they can trust you, and that you're going to do and show up the way you said that you're going to show up. Um, I think the other piece is really just having your ear to the ground. If you're just going home and going to work, and just kind of hearing third party information from media groups, but not actually sitting in community spaces, it's really easy to get a warped or lopsided view of what is actually happening or what the needs are actually happening in our community, especially if people outside of the community are telling us inside the community what we need. So it's really important to be in those communal spaces, like the barbershop, like the beauty shop, like community centers, parks, etc. So we can, really get firsthand information. And then, we just co-design our workshops and our programming in deep collaboration with our community. They inform our work, they give us feedback, they tell us what they need. We are there so that we can also see where there may be gaps. And so just really pushing each other towards a shared goal, a shared vision. It doesn't work if I am just trying to tell people what to do, right? So this is a shared space that has been built up over time.
And that's awesome. No, I remember I once did a barbershop talk, and one of the first things we did in our planning was make sure that we weren't pushing a particular agenda, correct? We
A
wanted to
thousand
make sure
percent.
that we were listening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
so, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and I think that's part of our ongoing strategy, right? It's very intentional, it's not haphazard. It's something that we do train with our facilitators across all of our programming. Like the answers are in the room. We are just simply facilitating the space for the information to be shared and then filling in any gaps as needed.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And we have a slide on it later, but I really want to emphasize that that's part of the key difference, right, between mutual aid and being in community, right,
Yeah.
and in charity, which is very important, but is comes from a different approach.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's amazing. And I really want to ask some of the things that you may have read, some of the mentors you may have had that have informed this community-centered approach that you all have adopted at Starting With Today.
Yeah, so I am originally from South Oak Cliff, Dallas, Texas, born and raised. And I was raised in community. I have amazing parents who sacrificed and made sure I had all the tools and resources that I need to succeed. And also I had a very robust community where wherever I landed, I was taken care of. Whether my parents were working late, I was at a neighbor's house, they fed me, they made sure I did my homework, they got me home safely. If I was, at a friend's house, they parents would make sure my parents knew where I was, all of those things. Now I can be somewhere I'm not supposed to be, 3 or 4 blocks over, and somebody will find out and tell my parents, like, and I would like make my way back home. So those are the things I think that we have um kind of gotten away from, but one of the things that I was really rooted in, this very immersive community experience that I didn't even know there was another way, right? Until I got older. But whether it was the churches or the school teachers, or community and family, um, I've never felt fortunately not cared for. And I've also just experienced, um with my family, we've always been a community with doing soup drives, or checking on the elderly, or creating packages for unhoused people. um I worked in the kitchen, I helped serve people after services. So just kind of that always in service was part of my upbringing. I say that I am a third generation activist, and I'm just the only one that do it formally and as a full business entity. But at least 3 generations back, this is the family practice for sure.
No, that's awesome. And I think one thing that I would really like to emphasize and double tap is the way in which just starting where you're at has
Yeah,
really seemed to inform your approach and informed your service. And also thinking through like the work that your ancestors, your the people before you've done. And you know, it can be very daunting, particularly in this moment in time, in order to kind of think through how can I really affect change in this moment.
yeah,
And I think that emphasis on beginning right within like you said that X mile radius of people that are closest to you is really something to really take away in this moment in time.
yeah. And I think to your point, and you're a very big history buff, but just really putting things in context, it's really easy to get caught up in the onslaught of information that we have access to, unfortunately, constantly. And it's hard to sometimes contextualize as all these horrible things are happening simultaneously, right? But as we look historically about movements and progress, um, it's really just building upon what has already existed and worked and continue to push the needle forward. Um, I wish it was a quicker process personally, but just understanding historically how people systems, you know, governments, powers to be, how change is made, and progress, kind of builds and moves forward.
No, for sure, for sure. Yeah, but let me not dilly dally too much. So uh here at Sojourners, we definitely want to we do focus on faith as resistance and restoration. And we like to center faith as a key factor in caring for others and moving people to action. And so I would love to hear a bit about how your faith has informed your work and your approach.
Yeah, I grew up in the church in Dallas, Texas, and I always had questions around what does it mean to move from theology as a theory to theology as a practice. And I found myself to be closest to my calling to this work, in seeing people as valuable, all people as valuable, people as worthy humans. And then also to using my gifts, whatever I have, or if it's information or resources, to support others. And that's also how I have been received as well. Like I've received so much care within the faith, within church. I'm currently a member of a congregation, and I really appreciate just the space of the black church, particularly as a social political sanctuary that has been for decades, if not centuries, and using that space not just for spiritual practice, but also the really edification of community, right? Um, I think as a whole, there's some work that's still before us as the church. I think it is as a whole, Christianity is being criticized, rightfully so, as a practice. And so I think there is some work before the church, but I think as a whole, the black church responsibility to community into social political change, right, has always been at the epicenter of moving us forward. And that has only shifted in the last generation or so. And so the call will be, how do we get back there? But yeah, I think just seeing people as worthy is a very Christ informed approach to my work.
Yeah, no, that hits on point a couple of things. One of the things that we really um focus on is the concept of Imago Dei. There's the image of God in each person,
Yeah,
and really making sure that that is centered in our work, right? And that also informs our approach to how we approach community, right? We want to make sure that we are not only coming in to help, but we're actually seeing and honoring, um, their unique spark and giving that voice in order to make sure that, they feel empowered to act. And I think another thing that you said there that really struck me is, you know, as the church has been rightfully criticized, how can, the church win back some of the credibility that is lost in the eyes of many? And in many ways, it's you'll know them by their acts, right? It won't
yeah,
be any argument, right? It won't be any particular um charismatic message or rapping or marketing plan that will bring people back to the church if they've walked away for a good reason. And so
right.
we have to be sure to while we're cognizant of the ways in which we've fallen short, um striving to show and be better, right? It's not enough to say, hey, I want to do better, or I want to, make sure my institution is better. But taking those concrete steps that allow people to trust you again. And that's pretty tough. And it goes back to something that I think you said a little bit earlier around consistency, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's not enough to say, hey, we messed up in the past, but we're sorry, and here's this thing one time. But it's that consistent act of showing up, that consistent act of showing care, that's really, really important when thinking through uh how we show up in community and how the institutions we're a part of are showing up in community as well. Um,
And I think there's a lot of things that are disruptive right now in the church. And I don't talk about the black church because that's my personal experience, but just so much of theology is rooted in shame and making ourselves feel better than other people, and we adopted a lot of individualism within the church, that is really just within the last 20 years, right? So I think when you talked before about like hope, I am hopeful that this can just be a blip and that we can kind of just really kind of override that with intentionality, to your point. But I think there has to be, a consensus of what the church's role is going to be in the social political climate that we find ourselves in, and it can't be on the outskirts looking in. And we really have to get back in the battle as a part of the message of liberation through Christ.
Right, right. And I think part of that, right, is going to be through um prophetic witness, right? By being able to tell people, hey, if you do these things, um, these people will suffer, or these things are going to happen. Um, and being able to, show and understand how things are moving through the world and being able to point out exactly where things are going to head. And if uh, you know, people continue along that path, A, they can never say they weren't warned, but B, we would hope be a little bit more inclined to listen the next time, right? And so hopefully people won't have to suffer as a result of poor decisions made by people in leadership. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. I think one more thing is um the role of the church in showing up in the community, not only as an advocate but as a helping hand, as we talked about here, often with engaging in depth, and showing that people that you care about their needs, right? Making sure that they have food in their stomachs, making sure that they have a place to lay their head, can go a long way, right? In showing people and rebuilding trust, that and showing that the church is moving in a way that acts in their lives.
Absolutely, and I think that kind of wraps up through the holiday season. But to your point, the consistency, showing up in areas that need it the most, even if it's not your immediate service area, I think it's going to be really important for the churches that have more capital, more access to really show up in meaningful ways.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so I also want to make sure to talk about some self-care. We talk about restoration here. So what are some of the spiritual practices or even some non-spiritual practices that you've used to ground yourself in this moment?
I've been walking a lot. As soon as I feel anxiety coming on, I am like, grab a friend, let's go for a walk. And it's been really helpful just to get fresh air. Just the bilateral movement of walking allows for my anxiety to be reduced. Yoga is a go-to spiritual practice for me as well. As also going to church is something that I have recommitted to as far as serving within the church. I was always going, but serving as well, even with my busy schedule, I think has found a community in a way that I hadn't had it within the church community before. And well, recently I grew up with it, but here in DC. And um yeah, just taking time to rest, reset, whether that's a staycation or if I can get away for a couple of days. I love the water. I love the beach. It's restorative for me. So whenever I can get away um, to a beach, I'm out. And prayer and friends. And one of my goals this year, it was actually kinda inspired by you too, just, like, having my home open again for, like, friends and have a soft place to land and hosting and informal and not needing it to be perfect or curated and put together, but really like when you used to go over your grandma's or seniors, houses where it's just like, just push it to the side, baby, and have some cake and like that is what I have been craving this year and really have prioritized like um just really laughter and joy in this moment that otherwise would not um, create space for it to happen.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I definitely love a walk. Um, a nice hike is always restorative. And hopefully my place isn't too elderly with the push it to the side, but I
No,
certainly enjoy yeah, having people over and sharing and breaking bread. I think that's
breaking bread.
one of the keys to life. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we've gotten away from that, right? So we're, especially in DC area, we are so quick to go to brunch or happy hour or outside, and as we see like this economy failing us, like we're going to have to still need those spaces, and but it might just look different. And I think we just need to go back to where we know works, and that's going to be like each other's houses, potlucks again, and just like really finding community in more sustainable ways.
No, most definitely. I was definitely thinking potlucks, rent parties, things of that nature are going to become a little bit more important
Right.
in this moment in time. And so I think, again, coming back to some of those practices is going to be really, really useful.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to ask you a few recommendations, things, tips you can give to folks who are looking to get involved where they live, looking to get involved in this moment. And I'll make sure to join and add some as well.
Absolutely. I think there are big things and small things. I say focus on the small things. Well, make sure you know your neighbors. I mean, it's not necessarily given. I think you should know 5 neighbors easily. They should have your phone number. They should know where you live, who's in your household. I think that's just a really good starting point. To just at least know your neighbors. I live in a multi ethnic group. So I've really been learning Spanish before Bad Bunny was announced for Super Bowl. Like I've been trying to learn Spanish. Once we saw, the administration was switching over. Um, so that's just a small thing I think personally that I'm doing to be a better neighbor as we've, in my witness. Um, Also just start with something, I think generally just start with something you're good at. I think a lot of times we get really ambitious and try to take on something that we never done before. We're trying to do a bake sale, we never baked. We're trying to, just start with the things that you're good at. It might be asking if anybody needs their line cut, or anybody need help picking up groceries, or those kind of things I think are really important, especially when we're talking about some of our Latino brothers and sisters, who sometimes the children aren't going to school because of ICE, and do the need the homework. So there's so many things that are meaningful and intentional that don't have to be a huge lift. I think just looking at your life and seeing where the opportunities to add plus one, plus two, I think will go a long way.
No, I definitely agree there. Particularly around knowing your neighbors and also the situational awareness, the understanding the context of the current moment in order to understand who's currently being targeted, right? Um, and making sure that you are cognizant of that as you're moving, cognizant of that as you're offering to help folks, but really making sure that you're not, um, going over your skis a little bit too much because that's the way in which sometimes people kind of stumble in trying to get involved. Is you may try and get a little bit over your skis, a little bit outside of your area of expertise,
Right.
and it's great to stretch yourself, but you also want to make sure that you are doing things, that you can do in a way that shows up consistently for others and also isn't burning you out yourself. So, I think that's
1000%. And
yeah.
I think one of the things too, just to add on, is like odds odds are if you're in a major city, somebody is tackling the issue at hand. Find them, Google them, ask how you can show up, support, and volunteer. I think a lot of times people think they have a fresh idea and they want to start from scratch, and like just really there's a lot of hands on deck. There are a lot of people already on the ground doing the work. Find something that interests you, that you're passionate about, whether it's food security or housing, affordable housing, or well-being, whatever ignites that fire within you. Find who's already on the ground and find ways to support them. I think will be more meaningful and again more sustainable.
Yeah, and I'm going to go off the map a little bit here and ask you because you've got a pretty great team around you over there, starting with today, folks who show up pretty consistently and do pretty good work. How did that process work for you? How did that look for you? How did that look for them in finding you?
Yeah, I think visibility is really important in this work, in storytelling, and just making sure people can understand my why. So just really opportunities of being in spaces that are similar. I go to a lot of conferences around DC. DC is the conference probably capital of the world. But anything around social justice, economic mobility, economic justice are spaces that I go to meet like-minded people even before I starting with today. And it was kind of to know how I can get involved. I also volunteered at, different schools and programs across the area before launching. I also worked for a nonprofit before. And also worked in local government. So just like, all of those things where I think it's really important, to know what your North Star are. I think all of my work aligned in this space. And then I began to attract the people by being in those spaces that are similarly aligned. That's how I met you at community fair, right? So you'll find people doing the work that are interested in learning how to do effective work in those spaces. And then I think as a leader, it's important for me to continue to share the stories of our community, the work that's happening, and then also what drives the work and how I am processing the world around me and our community and approaching how we starting with today's positioning ourselves in this particular moment or in the context of our work in the community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And yeah, really great tips for networking and finding people to get into the work with. So what are some of the biggest lessons you've taken away from your work so far?
I think really early on at the barbershop was just like how much brilliance is in the room. I think that has been the most fertile learning ground for myself as a person. Um, from businessmen or business people to, multi-generational spaces where you have elders and children and everybody has equal footing in the barbershop, right? There's not really hierarchy there. And how ideal that could be, I think is how I have tried to design our programs and our work and my leadership skills around that type of drumming circle, if you will.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So there's a question here from the chat that I just caught myself. And it came about 15 minutes ago. So I'm guessing it may have something to do with someone starting with today's work. Are you all are white people invited into the space? Is that a comfortable accommodation? What are your thoughts there?
Though, starting with today, spaces are protected spaces or protected safe spaces. So, of course, businesses, you can walk into any business and get services. But once white people enter the space, it's no longer necessarily a safe space for um, people to share trauma or, you know, a lot of our work is around the result of trauma around oppression and racism and how that's directly affecting our community. There are a lot of ways we have a lot of supporters who are right, who support our work either through food drives, gift cards, supporting our families that we work with. We support about 10 to 15 families throughout the year who have large families that are on government assistance. And um, that is where they find it. And follow us on social, where you will see a lot of the work happening, where you can get a context of what's happening without necessarily um, inviting into the space.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand, and I think there is um I don't even say conversation. I think there is a bit of a shared understanding around the way in which we are all fighting kind of a universal fight, right, for each other
Yeah.
across difference, across um yeah, across difference. But within that, we are not erasing that difference, right? And not erasing some of those particularities. And a part of that is having different spaces for different people, where they can kind of talk through that particular, some of that specific, while contributing to the universal fight.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely. And again, I think there's a lot of ways, other ways to support the work in which we have, a great group of supporters that are advocates for our spaces as well. Um, but as universal as the human experience is in America, um, being Black, it comes with so many other unique challenges. And same if it was a deaf community or um, a Native American community. Um, I think sacred. Some spaces have to be sacred to allow the weight of the world to not to at least dissolve for a little bit, for sure.
yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. All right. So I really appreciate you joining me. I once again want to make sure that we double tap on the fact that mutual aid is not charity. Charity is very necessary in a lot of different contexts, particularly in this moment in time. But mutual aid is a collective coordination to meet each other's needs, usually from an awareness that the systems we have in place are not going to meet them as they are. And so I think starting with today is a really good example of this. And I definitely want to give you the opportunity to kind of just riff on this thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So our main programs bring Black licensed therapists, wellness practitioners, lawyers, professionals, etc., to the Black barbershop and beauty shops in the Washington, D.C. areas, particularly in communities that have the highest needs, where we talk about, not just race, but there's a huge gap of access to services, to our community, both culturally, financially, and location wise. So, how do we remedy those gaps that are often intentional, um, and not um, by accident or happenstance? We have to be really clear about that. And how do we override the red tape that is in America's healthcare system to get services, information, and practitioners to our communities that are some of the most impacted by policy and broken systems in this country and in this area, specifically in the Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah, Thank you for that answer. All right, so we're going to go through, and I want to get you all's reaction in the chat, and ask what are some of the forms of mutual aid your faith community has done. Please feel free to share in the chat. This is a question that we're kind of recurring here on Engage and Adapt. Um, and as those are coming in, I'm going to jump into where we're at now, what's been kind of happening lately politically. Charlyn, would you mind staying on and riffing with me until the end here?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then at the end we're going to share resources for folks to get involved if they like. All right, so when systems tremble, the faithful build together. And right now we are watching systems tremble. So the government shutdown is currently, the Senate voted to end it. The House is, if they haven't completed the vote, they are currently voting. So there is, you know, hope on the government shutdown front so that folks will be able to get back to work. And the House and Senate will begin negotiations around Affordable Care Act subsidies, or maybe perhaps on the Republican side, alternatives to the Affordable Care Act. Um, it does look like healthcare premiums would be rising next year if they do not come to an agreement soon. So this is something that we want to make sure that we keep an eye on, and something that we're cognizant of, as people are, dealing with fallout from, higher prices of insurance. Housing costs are rising, food instability deepening, particularly with the um, back and forth over SNAP in the courts at the current moment, despite the prospect of the government reopening. The Trump administration is still continuing to fight the against the full funding of SNAP. So we're going to continue to monitor that, but we also want to make sure that we're being cognizant of the need in our communities through our churches, food banks, the other institutions that we support. And then, as we talked about earlier in our conversation, the immigrant community, our undocumented community, is under targeted stress at this moment in time. They are the Trump administration is really stepping up their efforts at surveillance and targeting people in a very, very particular way. So that was a little bit of a downer. Charlene, do you have anything you want to add there?
Um, no, I think it's really important as we think about, and I would love your input about, like, historically where we were, 50 years ago, how we were taking care of each other. Like, I think those practices are just going to have to kind of come back to the forefront. We talked about the rent parting food, but like, I know churches used to have a nurse or doctor on hand, and, have these health drives, health fair drives. I think more of those are going to be needed to fill in the gap for people who are losing access to care.
No, most definitely. I think clinics, health drives, like as you discussed, food drives, of course, all these things are preventative care, and really important in trying to make sure that people are able to stay healthy if they don't have access to the emergency care or even the long term care that they may need. One thing I also want to make sure to raise is that and this might be on a later slide, so I should probably not, is that when we say our communities are under targeted stress, this also means economically people aren't able to work, as Charlene was able to pointed out earlier. Students aren't able to go to school in order to learn. And while the direct physical danger is very important, in like the most dangerous thing right now, it's very important particularly as so many people are falling in the need to acknowledge and understand that a lot of folks in these communities are being targeted economically, and they do not have access to the same resources that or the same social safety net that we may have access to. So please keep that in mind as you're thinking through your advocacy as well. Some of the ways in which people are fighting back: federal workers utilizing mutual aid, and working with churches and each other in order to make sure that they have some of the resources they need as they continue to wait for uh, the shutdown to resolve itself or be resolved by Congress. Food banks and churches are under strain. This particular gap in SNAP funding has really stressed food banks, and it's going to take a while for them to fully recover. So we want to make sure to keep that in mind. And layoffs are increasing. There's a lot more economic stress, a lot of private sector layoffs, in addition to a lot of federal layoffs. Uh, and so we also want to make sure we're keeping that in mind as we advocate for programs like SNAP, like Medicaid, that are meant to be our collective response to hardship. All right. So as I said earlier, Congress is scheduling an Affordable Care Act subsidy vote. We also have some demands to reverse cuts to Medicaid, and states are assessing their ability to adjust funding for SNAP and Medicaid as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that passed earlier this year. While some of those provisions aren't going to take effect immediately, states do have to plan ahead and start to try and prioritize their funding. And so that's an area that we as sojourners are going to want to try and get faith leaders involved in order to make sure that as states are trying to think through how they're going to adjust their funding, they're doing so in a way that doesn't harm the community, while also pushing state legislators to kind of communicate to their federal counterparts what's going on at the state level, why it may not be the best for them. So that's part of where we're at right now. I want to make sure to pause. Charlene, is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think just to highlight that policy starts with people. The conversation that are happening in your communities, in your church, at your kitchen table, at your schools, at your school boards are informing policy. Like, this is not We didn't accidentally land here, and to move us out of the situation towards equity, towards healing and survive, moving beyond survival. I think the conversations on a micro level have to shift as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right. State and municipal leaders are establishing safeguards from ICE as best as they can. Union legal advocacy are also you know, pushing for on behalf of workers, or particularly those who were threatened. Federal workers were threatened with having their back pay withheld um, as a result of the furlough. And there's a lot of energy in making sure that everyone is made whole that was affected by the shutdown. And then local food banks, churches, and advocates such as ourselves demanding aid funding for folks domestically and abroad. I just saw a hand raised. Is there something I may have missed in the chat from Ngay? I'm sorry, Nancy. I'm sorry. May have been an accident. That definitely happens with technology. All right. And then also we understand that communities at the margin bear the weight. Low-income families are facing coverage gaps in healthcare, as well as being impacted by the delay in SNAP funding disproportionately. Uh, Returning federal employees and contractors who haven't been able to pay their bills for a while are also having their, that back pay kind of up in the air in the Congress, and they're depending on the timing of votes, congressional votes. We're seeing high benevolence requests. And then we're also seeing a lot more stress in black and brown rural and urban communities, both. All right. And so I want to ask one quick question. If there's in similar to what Charlyn said earlier, what will you do in your community? If there's one thing that you can do in the area near you, please feel free to put it in the chat. It's a question, you don't have to have an answer for right now, but something that I really think it's important that we think about, and how we show up in our everyday, in addition to the way in which we try and affect systemic change. All right. And so where do we go from here? We want you to publicly use your voice. So following this webinar, we're going to send out an email for folks with a step-by-step guide on writing an op-ed. We would love to see an outpouring of, just people raising their voices on behalf of people in need, people who need SNAP, people who need healthcare, so that people don't feel so alone, and the people who are making these decisions understand that uh, there are a lot of people who feel frustrated by the state of things currently, with people going without. So I just saw the question here from Nancy. Thank you for putting in the chat there. Have you thought about boycotting these businesses owned by owners that support Trump, like Amazon and Facebook? We have launched a corporate campaign, and we're definitely looking at more. And we want to make sure that we are including boycotts in that economic analysis in our work as well, because that is a big part of the work, is affecting corporate actors who do hold disproportionate power in this moment. So I really want to thank you for that suggestion, Nancy. So in addition to how to write an op-ed, which can really do a lot in order to raise your voice in your community, and let people feel as if they're not alone, and maybe change the mind of some of the decision makers, we're also continuing the Octavia Butler book series by Reverend Moya Harris. It's they just had their first session. It was excellent. So I definitely recommend you looking into that if that's something you're interested in. And then we also have our Almighty Networks instance, in order to make sure that we are continuing the conversation, sharing how we're affecting our communities, and then continuing to plan and think through how we can change things from here. I want to make sure to pause for Charlyn. Is there anything you want to add? Anything you want to plug?
No, I love the Octavio book series. I think there's so many books out there now that give historical reference to the time that we're in, and give us also a blueprint to a map that we can use to move forward. That's because this is precedent, but not unprecedented, but precedented. So it's not something that we can't overcome and move forward. And I think books are a great way to do that. So I was excited about that.
Well, thank you. Well, I really, really want to thank you for joining me today, Charlyn. Um, I really enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing in the community. And I'm honored to have you and talk with you today. And so yeah, just wanted to make sure to express that and leave you space for any last words.
Yeah, thank you so much. You can learn more about Starting With Today at startingwithtoday.org. We're also on Instagram where you can, witness the videos and the work that we do in community at Starting With Today. And yeah, feel free to reach out via email as well. Info at Starting With Today. We're happy to take questions, feedback, etc. And then just be really good, take really good care of yourselves and each other, and be intentional about that care.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. If you've made it here to the end, I really appreciate it. And have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.